Hi, I'm Jill Fitzhenry, a Dynasty brand specialist with the FM Brush Company. Welcome to our series, Meet the Dynasty Artists. These talented artists are the creative backbone that make Dynasty brushes so popular. Each artist has their own unique way of using the brushes and love to share their expertise. So let's get to know some of them a little better. Today, I would like to introduce you to Annie Strack. Let me tell you a little bit about Annie. She's a professional artist whose classical training included advanced studies in numerous artistic mediums. She's been published in many magazines, including Plain Air Magazine, The Artist Magazine, Watercolor Magazine, The Crafts Report, Gallery Insider, House and Home, Louisiana Life, Gulf Coast Arts and Entertainment Review, Louisiana Homes and Gardens, and dozens of newspaper and television interviews. Her work has been featured on the covers of Art Calendar magazine, Harmon Homes magazine, Inside Northside magazine, and North Lake News magazine. She's won hundreds of awards and grants and had 22 solo shows. She was contributing editor for a professional artist magazine for over a decade and authored The Artist's Guide to Business and Marketing. She's the host of Painting Seascapes and Watercolor, which is broadcast on TV worldwide and also available on DVD. She earned signature membership in 20 artists' societies, including the International Society of Marine Painters and International Plein Air Painters, and she's an official authorized artist of the USCG. She's an expert in the uses of properties of artist materials and works for manufacturers to test and review their products. Her art is in over 1,000 public, private, and private collections worldwide, including USCG, Navy, Senate, Pentagon, VA, and many more. And she teaches workshops and classes throughout the world. Let's welcome Annie Strack. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Jill. It's great to be here. Great to see you.
Good to see you also. Well, I'm really anxious to get to know you a little better and share you with our audience. So let's, right off the bat, tell me a little bit about your journey in becoming an artist and how you got started.
Well, like everyone, like most people, I did go to art school at a very young age. And then I didn't pursue art in college, though, because, back then we were all told you have to have a real job and you can't major in art because you'll never make a living at it. So it wasn't until 1990 something, the late 90s, that I made the transition from being a hobby artist, like everyone, painting on weekends and entering the occasional art show. I made the transition to being a full-time professional. So it's, I don't know, what's that, 20 some years.
Nice. So, and where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, everywhere. I travel a lot. My husband is with the National Park Service. So for the last 30-some, nearly 40 years, we've been traveling around the world with the National Park Service to various national parks and living in various places around the world. So I get a lot of inspiration from that, traveling around Asia and around Europe, as well as around the US to all the national parks.
What are some of your favorite mediums?
Well, mostly watercolor. I would have to say watercolor is my favorite, although I do a lot of oils when I work in plein air. And the reason for that is because for those of you who are plein air painters, you have to have your canvas stamped or paper in the morning when you start painting in these competitions. And then you have to turn it in framed at the end of the day. And that's a lot easier to do if you're working on canvas panels as opposed to watercolor paper, because it's just very easy to pop that in a frame. But if you're on paper, then you have to deal with mats and plexiglass and keeping it in a sterile environment when sometimes you're out in the rain trying to do this. So I do both, but then I also do a lot of acrylics. I teach acrylics as well, but I don't really paint a lot in them, although I do love painting acrylics. It's a lot of fun.
Now, I know that you teach really all over the world. Tell me some of your favorite places that you've taught.
Oh gosh. So I just got back this summer. I did 2 back-to-back workshops in Brittany, France, which is just south of Normandy. And I did them on the invitation of my friend Eve Marie, who is the director of the Sennelier company. He invited me to bring a group there and visit his factories, the Sennelier and a few other companies, and also paint. So I spent a whole month this summer in Brittany with artists, traveling up and down the coast and seeing the sights and swimming in the English Channel and painting Brittany. That was probably the best. Although next summer I am taking a group to Italy. We're going to Marche, which is between Tuscany and the Adriatic. And similar type of trip. We'll be painting and eating, of course, and drinking our way around Italy.
Oh, that sounds lovely. I wish I could be a little part of your luggage and go along. That would be awesome.
Oh, and Dynasty Brush. Oh, before I forget, Dynasty Brush is generously supplying everyone who goes on my Italy trip with brushes, a set of brushes.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, they're an awesome company to work with. They are so generous and really do appreciate the artists and the talent. So that's great. So speaking of the brushes, what are some of your favorite brushes in the Dynasty brand?
Well, my top favorite is the Water Lily. It's I'm sure everyone has seen these with the orange handle. And it's a great synthetic brush. It's got the new technology in that the hairs are much more absorbent than a synthetic brush. The hairs are more like a natural hair. They're absorbent, so it reacts more like a Kolinsky. You know, it's funny that they're not marketed as a Kolinsky replacement, because that's really how they behave. Very absorbent, but still have a lot of spring, but not really stiff. My other favorite, my number 2 brush is this one. Some of you might recognize it. This is the Faux Squirrel. It is the Reservoir Liner. And what it is, it's almost like 2 brushes in one. If I peel this back, it's got a rigger in the center, these long hairs that are about 2 inches long, but then it also has this big belly. So it's like a round brush with the liner in the center. So what it does, kind of like a fountain pen, it holds all this extra fluid here. And then as you're using it, it slowly releases it. So you're not having to reload your brush. It goes a long way. It makes long strokes before you have to dip it back in your paint or your water. So that's my other big favorite that I it's a go-to. Everyone must have one of these.
Awesome. Now, I do remember talking to you once before, and one of the things that you liked about the water lily was the construction of the filament and
Yes.
how it's different from just a natural straight shaft of hair. So, remind us a little bit about that.
So this new technology with these new artificial hairs, these new synthetic hairs, is that the hairs are crimped at an almost microscopic level that you can't even see it at the naked eye. So they kind of make a squiggly zigzag pattern out of each individual hair that you don't even see. But what that does, when you dip this brush in water, those hairs then create little pockets in between, and you have the water tension holding in between the hairs. Whereas if I dip a straight brush in water, The hairs, this is a traditional, this is the Fokolinsky by Dynasty. And you'll notice it's still straight here. The brush is still straight, almost as straight as it was when it was dry. Whereas when I dip the water lily, it bellies out. It's wider here and it still has the point. So it swells up to hold that extra water because of that that water tension between the hair. Kind of like, think of a honeycomb and think of how the tension between the walls of the honeycomb allows the honey to grasp and fill that void. That's kind of how this new technology works in these brushes. So it's a little bit of a crimping. It might also just the hairs are not straight. They are split and other things done to them individually that you don't even see it until you use it. So now when you're using this brush, because it's holding so much more fluid, again, you're not having to reload it. You can make longer, more spontaneous brush strokes because it goes further. More like a natural hairbrush. It's a great alternative, a vegan alternative to using natural hair.
I think that's great. I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge about that. That makes it worth the price of admission right there. So I believe that you are going to share a little sample of some techniques that you offer. So I think what I'll do is I'll turn it over to you. And let's see. We want to pin you. There you go. So take it away.
Great. So what I have here is I have my Dynasty brushes, and I'm just going to set them aside and just work with this one I've already got wet, maybe with this flat. I like this flat as well. These are my favorite, like I said, the water lilies. And what I have here is a little drawing of a seascape, a little landmass, some water, and some beach. Just this very small painting. It's only a 9 by 12. And using my flat brush, I'm first going to, and this is my water lily that holds a lot of moisture, I'm just going to paint in the sky, wet on wet. And because it holds so much water, I might actually have too much water on there. I do. I need to pick some of that up. There we go. Now I'm just going to pick up some cobalt blue here in my palette. And I'm using pan watercolors, and I'm going to test. Oh, wow, I have a lot. Like I said, this holds a lot of paint, and I'm going to put down the paint. Look at how much paint is on that brush. Quickly painting in the sky, and I'm going to come down a little bit more, and then I'm just going to blot out the clouds real fast. Over to paper towel. Those of you who do a lot of watercolor, you know how easily this is to blot out your clouds. And now I have a nice, let's see, I'm going to bring that up there. Yeah. So clouds. And while I still have this brush damp, I'm going to go ahead and lay in the water. I'm going to work this wet on dry. And I'm picking up some more of the cobalt. I have my horizon line right here. And I'm just dragging this down. Gosh, see how far this brush goes without having to reload it. And here I want to thin this out where my water overlaps the sand. So I need to actually rinse some of that paint out now and just cover it like so. I can deepen some values by dipping my brush in some indigo. And this also warms up the foreground a little bit because, you know, things that are closer to you are warmer in temperature and things that are further away are cooler in temperature. So this water that is closer to me, I'm making a little bit warmer in temperature by just adding a little bit of this indigo to it. Now, this yellow right here that you see, that's actually masking fluid. I've preserved the white of the paper by putting masking fluid down before I started this painting. And I'll bring this over a little bit more. Now I have this land mass here, and that's like, here I have beach and here I have a little island. So again, I'm going to pick up, this is kind of farther away. So I'm going to cool up some greenish color by adding a little bit of blue to my green. And you know, I didn't even change brushes yet. I'm still using the same brush. And I'll pick up some of this green. Maybe a little bit yellow. There we go. And I'm just dabbing in a little bit of color, overlapping a little right down to the water here. Where I want to change up values, I'm going to add a little bit of the indigo. And where I want to lighten the value, I'll add a little bit of yellow ochre or quin gold. Either one is a good lighter value. Yeah, I got to take some of that paint off the brush. I've got too much. Because you know, you don't always have to paint green, use green paint to paint green. There are cases where you can put two colors side by side. Like here I put the indigo and here I put the yellow. From a distance, it reads like green. It's like that famous artist, that French impressionist who did the dots. And when you stand back, it reads as green, but when you walk up close, you see where he has green, it's actually yellow and blue dots next to each other. I'm adding a little bit more indigo here. Again, that just gives it a few darker values. Wash out my brush. I've got 2 buckets of water here. I still haven't even changed brushes. I'm still using the same brush I started with. I'm still using this 1-inch flat. That's another nice thing. It has a nice sharp edge on it and good points, good corners, so I can get fine details with it as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up some mud for doing the sand. And I'm just scrumbling some colors. That's a little bit too green. I'll pick that up. Let's add some brown to it. There we go. So here I've got my sand going, and the further away, it's going to be cooler. So I'm going to add a little bit of red to my mud and just to cool it down. And I'm going to let it go ahead and touch this wet paint here so that it all kinds of goes together, so that it kind of flows. Wow, that's it. I just did a seascape. So I'm going to turn it back. I think everybody can see that pretty well. Today's seascape. So after it dries, then I can peel up this masking fluid. As you know, those of you who work in watercolor and work with masking fluid know, never peel up your masking fluid while anything is damp around it. So after this dries, I can peel up the masking fluid, and then I'll have the white paper there to show that surf line coming down. I'm actually going to deepen a few more of these values with a little bit of this indigo while it's still wet. Because that's the other thing, because I have the masking fluid here, I'm going to have white. And when you put your darkest and your lightest values next to each other, it creates a focal point. So by doing that, I'm going to put some more indigo here. I'm training the eye to go and travel across the painting now. That was it.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I've got to ask you, how did you get involved with having your paintings in the Senate, the Pentagon, and other places like that? How did that come up?
So I'm an official authorized artist for the United States Coast Guard, and I got juried into that program. I applied to that program about almost 30 years ago, and I was juried into it. And what happens is occasionally they send me on location. They'll say, we'd like you to go out and paint these guys doing a mission or doing a training mission, never actual missions. So they'll send me different places. When I was in Louisiana, I was sent quite often in the Gulf area, Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Charles, to take reference photos of them while they were training and then paint paintings from those reference photos. And then what happens is they go into the permanent collection of the Coast Guard. And from there, they also go into other locations. So the painting that's in the Pentagon is a painting that I did for the Coast Guard years ago. And they also go on loan to members of Congress and the Senate. So one of my paintings is hanging in a senator's office from Louisiana right now.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Accomplished so much in your short life already. Now, people can find you on all kinds of places. You're on Annie Strack art.com is your website.
Yes.
You have a blog. You're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn, Pinterest. So all kinds of places. So we'll put a little link to some of those so they can find you. Any last comments that you would like to make?
Oh, gosh. I hadn't thought of that. No, check me out on the internet. I have things like what I did today. I often put these on YouTube. Now, this one you'll be posting,
Right.
but if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find lots of tutorials from me on various painting subjects, seascapes, koi, things like that. And you can follow along. Some of them are an hour long. They're a whole workshop on YouTube.
That's wonderful. That's great. So, well, Annie, thank you so much for sharing your talent with us today. And hopefully people will go and check you out. But thanks so much.
Thank you, Jill. It was a pleasure being here.